He pulled me into his room with promise in his eyes. But what happened next destroyed me completely. I waited 3 years for this night. He went soft the moment it mattered most. Sheila Marie Thornton had never considered herself the kind of woman who had affairs. She was 32 years old, married with a 6-year-old son, a respectable marketing director at a mid-sized consumer goods company in Columbus, Ohio. She drove a Honda CR-V, volunteered at her son's school on Tuesdays, and had a perfectly adequate marriage to a man named Greg who worked in logistics for a freight company and played fantasy football with the kind of dedication most people reserved for religion. By all appearances, Sheila was a picture of quiet suburban contentment. But beneath that polished exterior, something had been slowly unraveling for years. Sheila had married Greg when she was 24, after a whirlwind courtship that felt more like a business merger than a love story. He was stable, reliable. He remembered her birthday and never forgot to take out the trash. When she told him she was cold one October evening, he drove to Target at 11 p.m. to buy her a new electric blanket without a single complaint. When her mother came to visit from their hometown in rural Kentucky, Greg took 3 days off work to drive her around Columbus, bought her a $300 camera as a gift even though his salary at the time was barely $2,200 a month. These gestures had mattered to Sheila. They still did, in their own quiet way. But marriage, she had come to understand, was more than a collection of thoughtful acts. It was a living thing that required a different kind of nourishment, something great had never quite been able to provide. She thought about her parents sometimes, the way they fought over dinner table grievances that had nothing to do with the food on their plates. Her mother had married a man she didn't love because he had a steady income and a respectable profession. Her father had married a woman who managed every aspect of his life because he couldn't manage it himself. They had spent 35 years resenting each other in a house that smelled like overcooked vegetables and quiet desperation. Sheila had promised herself she wouldn't become them. And yet, here she was at 32, standing at the edge of a cliff she hadn't meant to approach. The first time Sheila noticed Derek Hartwell, she was sitting in a company-wide meeting, pretending to take notes on her tablet while actually playing Candy Crush. He walked in like he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. As the newly appointed regional vice president overseeing the Columbus branch, Derek had been sent from headquarters in Chicago to fix what everyone internally called the mess. The Columbia office had hemorrhaged key staff members for months, losing account after account to competitors, and morale had cratered to the point where people were leaving in the middle of projects without even giving 2 weeks' notice. Derek changed all that within his first 6 weeks. He was 40 years old, tall with silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, and he carried himself with the kind of effortless authority that made people lean forward when he spoke. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, a piercing shade of gray, seemed to take in everything and everyone in the room simultaneously. He was, as one of the junior associates had famously put it, aging like fine wine in a tailored suit. Sheila had looked at him that first day and thought, with the detached cynicism of someone who had been married long enough to know better, he's married too. I can tell by the way he doesn't check anyone out. She was right, of course. Derek had a wife named Rebecca and 2 children, a daughter in middle school and a son in 5th grade. He lived in a suburb of Chicago and coached his daughter's travel soccer team on weekends. He posted pictures of family dinners and birthday parties on a Facebook account that looked suspiciously curated by someone who understood the importance of personal branding. Sheila told herself these things. She cataloged them like evidence in a case she had no intention of prosecuting. But something about Derek Hartwell had lodged itself beneath her skin in those early weeks, a splinter she couldn't quite locate or extract. It wasn't just the way he looked. Plenty of attractive men passed through corporate corridors these days, and Sheila had trained herself long ago not to notice. It was something in the way he moved through the world, the quiet confidence, the deliberate kindness, the way he remembered small details about people and brought them up later as if they actually mattered. When the marketing team presented a quarterly report that flopped spectacularly, Derek hadn't thrown anyone under the bus. Instead, he'd asked thoughtful questions, identified the systemic issues, and then, to everyone's disbelief, taken the blame himself in front of the executive team in Chicago. "That's my failure," he'd said, his voice calm and measured. "I should have caught this during my review period. We'll do better next quarter." The room had been silent for a full 3 seconds after he said it. Then the tension broke like a fever, and people started nodding, started believing maybe things actually could get better. Sheila had watched him during that speech, and she felt something shift in her chest, a small tectonic movement, like a glacier caving somewhere distant and remote. She told herself it was admiration, professional respect, nothing more. But late at night, when Greg was asleep and the house was dark and quiet, Sheila would lie awake and think about Derek Hartwell's gray eyes and the way they seemed to see straight through every wall she'd ever built. And she would feel ashamed of herself for hours afterward. They say that affairs begin in the margins, in the stolen glances, the incidental touches, the conversations that drift just slightly past the boundaries of professional propriety. For Sheila and Derek, the margin was a dinner meeting in late November. Sheila's department was responsible for nearly half of the company's revenue in the Columbus region. She had built her career from the ground up, starting as a junior account coordinator straight out of college, working double and triples for years while her male colleagues climbed the ladder beside her. She had fought for every account, every promotion, every inch of territory in a corporate landscape that hadn't always wanted her there. By the time Derek arrived, Sheila was one of the most respected and feared account directors in the region. She was known for her brutal efficiency, her razor-sharp presentations, and the way she could close a deal over drinks that left clients feeling like they'd made the best decision of their lives rather than the somewhat questionable one they actually had. Derek had noticed. Of course he had noticed. The dinner was supposed to be a working dinner. Sheila, Derek, and 2 of their biggest clients at an Italian restaurant in the Short North District. But somewhere between the second bottle of wine and the dessert course, the conversation drifted from quarterly projections to childhood memories to the kinds of philosophical tangents that only emerge when the wine flows freely and the hour grows late. One of the clients, a boisterous man named Carl who ran a distribution company, started telling a story about his daughter, how she'd come out to him last Thanksgiving and how proud he was of her courage. "She just looked at me across the table," Carl said, and said, "Dad, I'm gay." And I swear to God, I just sat there for like 10 seconds, and then I said, "Okay, honey, more turkey?" The table laughed. Derek smiled. But Sheila noticed something else. The way Derek's smile didn't quite reach his eyes, the way his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his wine glass. Later, after the clients had left and the check had been paid, Sheila found herself standing outside the restaurant with Derek while their drivers were summoned. "Cold?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. It was late November, and the temperature had dropped to the mid-30s. She hadn't brought a coat. Derek took off his jacket and drapes it over her shoulders without asking. The gesture was so casual, so unthinking, that Sheila almost didn't register what had happened. But then she looked up at him, and he was looking down at her, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "You're a remarkable woman, Sheila," he said quietly. "I'm really not," she replied, because she didn't know what else to say. "You are." His voice was low, almost private. "I've been watching you for months now. The way you handle your team, the way you manage clients, the way you carry yourself in meetings when everyone else is falling apart. You have no idea how rare that is." Sheila's heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Thank you," she managed. He smiled again, and this time it did reach his eyes. "Don't thank me. I'm just stating facts." A black car pulled up to the curb. Derek's driver had arrived. "Good night, Sheila," he said. "Get home safe." She watched his taillights disappear into the night, and she stood there for a long time afterward, his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, breathing in the scent of his cologne like it was oxygen. She didn't return the jacket for 3 days. She told herself it was because she kept forgetting. She wasn't lying, exactly. She just wasn't telling the whole truth. The weeks that followed were a study in controlled proximity. Sheila and Derek saw each other constantly, in meetings, in hallways, at client presentations and company events. They discussed quarterly targets and marketing strategy, and the latest office gossip about the CFO's alleged affair with someone in HR. They were always surrounded by people. Always professionally appropriate. Always careful. But underneath the surface, something was building, a kind of pressure that had nowhere to go, like steam with no release valve. Sheila started exercising more obsessively than usual. She bought new clothes, higher heels, a different shade of lipstick that she only wore on days when she knew Derek would be in the office. She told herself these things were unrelated, that she was simply investing in herself, taking care of herself, doing all the things the self-help books told her to do. She knew she was lying. In early December, Derek called her into his office for a meeting about the upcoming annual report. They spent 45 minutes discussing charts and graph and target demographic, and then, at the end, almost as an afterthought, Derek said, "I wanted to thank you, Sheila, for everything this year. I know I came into a difficult situation, and you made my transition significantly easier than it could have been." "It's my job," Sheila said. "It's more than your job." He paused. "You could have resented me, you know. New boss coming in, disrupting everything, asking questions that maybe should have been asked years ago. A lot of people in your position would have dug in their heels." "I don't dig in my heels," Sheila said, and then immediately regretted how defensive it sounded. Derek smiled. "No, you really don't." They looked at each other across his desk, and Sheila felt the air in the room change, thickening, condensing, becoming something almost tangible. "Derek," she started, but she didn't know how to finish the sentence. He waited. Patient. Calm. "Nothing," she said finally. "I should get back to my desk." "Of course." He turned back to his computer screen. "Oh, and Sheila? We're having a small holiday gathering for the leadership team next Friday. Just drinks at my place. I'd like you to come." Sheila's pulse quickened. "Your place?" "My rental. The company put me up in a townhouse in Dublin. It's small, but it has character." He smiled. "It would be nice to have you there. Off the clock, I mean. Just socializing." "I'll think about it," Sheila said, because she didn't trust herself to say yes immediately. "Good," Derek said. "Think about it." She walked back to her office with legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, and she closed her door, and she sat in her chair and stared at the wall for 20 minutes without moving. She didn't go to the party. She told herself it was because she wasn't feeling well, which was technically true. She had a headache and a general sense of malaise that she attributed to too much wine at a work event earlier that week. But she knew the real reason. She knew that if she went to Derek's house, if she sat on his couch and drank his wine and listened to him laugh and talk in his own space, she would do something she couldn't take back. So she stayed home. She made dinner for Greg and their son. She helped with homework. She folded laundry and watched television and went to bed at a reasonable hour. And she texted Derek at 11:47 p.m. Asterisk sorry I missed the party. Hope it went well asterisk. She stared at the message for several minutes before sending it. Then she turned off her phone and put it on the nightstand and tried to fall asleep. Her phone buzzed at 11:52. Me too, Derek had written. Asterisk actually, I was hoping you'd be there. It wasn't the same without you asterisk. Sheila stared at the screen for a long time. Then she typed, why? The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Asterisk because I wanted to see you. Because I think about you more than I should. Because you're married and I'm married and none of this is a good idea, but I can't seem to help myself asterisk. Sheila's hands were shaking. That's not appropriate, she typed. No, Derek replied. It's not. Another pause. The typing indicator appeared. Are you going to tell me to stop? Sheila thought about Greg, asleep down the hall. She thought about her son, his room full of Star Wars posters and half-finished science project. She thought about the life she had built, the stability she had cultivated, the quiet contentment she had worked so hard to maintain. She thought about Derek's gray eyes and the way he saw her, really saw her, in a way no one had in years. No, she typed finally. I'm not going to tell you to stop. The response came almost immediately. Asterisk good. Because I don't think I could asterisk. For the next 3 weeks, Sheila lived in a state of suspended animation. She went to work. She came home. She was a wife and a mother and a marketing director and all the other things she had always been. But underneath all of it, there was a current running, a live wire that hummed with possibility every hour of every day. Derek texted her every night. Sometimes just a few words, sometimes long rambling messages about his childhood, his marriage, his regrets, his hopes. Sheila learned that he had grown up in Michigan, that he had played college football before a knee injury ended his dream, that he had been married for 14 years and couldn't remember the last time his wife had looked at him the way Sheila looked at him across conference tables. She learned that he had a tattoo on his left shoulder blade, a small nautical star that he'd gotten when he was 19 and stupid, and that he still touched it sometimes when he was thinking. She told him things she had never told anyone. About her parents' marriage and the quiet resentment that had defined her childhood. About her own wedding day and a small voice in the back of her head that had wondered, just for a moment, if she was making a mistake. About the time she had almost left Greg, 5 years earlier, when she'd found flirtatious messages on his phone from a woman in his department and had spent 3 days crying in her car during lunch breaks. You didn't leave, Derek observed one night. No, Sheila said. I didn't. I confronted him, he apologized, I believed him, and we moved on. That's what you do when you have a life together. You move on. Do you regret it? Sheila thought about the question for a long time. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know if I regret staying. But I know that I wonder, sometimes, what would have happened if I'd left. What kind of person I would have become. And what kind of person do you think you would have become? Someone more like you, maybe. Someone who takes risks. Someone who isn't so afraid of everything. Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he typed, asterisk you take risks, Sheila. You're just afraid to admit it, asterisk. What do you mean? Asterisk I mean that you're sitting here, married, texting me until midnight about things you've never told anyone. That's a risk. Maybe not the kind that gets you noticed, but it's still a risk, asterisk. Sheila didn't know what to say to that. Are you sorry? She typed finally. About what? Asterisk about all of this. About telling me how you feel. About whatever this is, asterisk. The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. I'm not sorry, Derek wrote. Asterisk, I'm terrified. But I'm not sorry, asterisk. The week before Christmas, Derek told Sheila he was leaving. The announcement came during a Monday morning staff meeting, a brief, almost offhand statement that he was being recalled to Chicago headquarters and that a new regional VP would be arriving in the new year to take his place. The room erupted in murmurs. People looked at each other with expressions ranging from shock to genuine disappointment. Derek Hartwell had, in less than a year, turned the Columbus office around completely. His departure felt like a betrayal, even if no one could quite articulate why. Sheila sat perfectly still through the announcement. She didn't look at Derek. She didn't look at anyone. She stared at her notebook and the half-finished sketch she had been making, a habit she had when she needed to hide her faith, and she counted her breath. 1 breath. 2. 3. When the meeting ended, people gathered around Derek to shake his hand and offer congratulations and ask if he was coming back ever. Sheila slipped out of the room before anyone could stop her. She made it to her office. She closed the door. She sat in her chair. And then she started crying. Not sobbing, she wasn't that far gone. But tears, silent and unstoppable, rolling down her cheeks while she stared at the framed photo of her family on her death. She didn't know why she was crying. She had known this was coming, in a sense. Derek was ambitious. He had never hidden that. He had been sent to Columbus to fix the problem, and he had fixed it, and now he was being rewarded with a promotion and a return to headquarters. This was how corporate life worked. You moved, you climbed, you adapted. But knowing that didn't make it hurt less. Her phone buzzed. A text from Derek. Asterisk, I saw you leave. Are you okay? Asterisk. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and typed, asterisk, I'm fine. Just a headache, asterisk. I don't believe you. It doesn't matter if you believe me. You're right, Derek replied. Asterisk, it doesn't. But I wish it did, asterisk. Sheila sat down her phone and stared at the ceiling for a long time. That night, after her son was asleep and Greg was in his home office playing his online game, Sheila went downstairs and poured herself a glass of wine. Then she poured another. At 10:30, her phone buzzed. Are you awake? Derek had written. Yes, she replied. Can I call you? Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at the stairs, at the closed door of Greg's office, at the quiet house around her. Yes, she typed. He called 30 seconds later. His voice was low, almost hoarse, and Sheila could hear the tension in it, the weight of everything they hadn't said. I know we're not supposed to do this, he said. I know it's complicated. But I needed to hear your voice. My voice? She almost laughed. Why? Because I've been thinking about you all day. Because when I made that announcement this morning, the only thing I could think about was your face in the crowd. Because I spent the whole meeting trying not to look at you, and I failed completely. Sheila closed her eyes. Derek. I know. I know we said we would stop. I know we said this was a mistake. But I can't stop, Sheila. I've tried. I've been trying for weeks, and I can't. I know, she whispered. I can't either. There was a long silence. Somewhere in the background, she could hear the faint sound of a television, the late-night news, maybe, or some show Derek had on for background noise. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know. When I leave, what happens to us?" Sheila opened her eyes and looked at the photo of her family on the desk. Greg smiled back at her, his arm around her shoulders, their son between them. They looked happy. They looked like a family. "I don't know," she said again. "But I don't want to find out. Not yet. Not tonight. What do you want?" She took a breath. "I want to pretend, for a little while longer, that this is real. That we could be something. That I'm not just a mistake you made in Columbus." "You're not a mistake," Derek said, and his voice was so fierce that Sheila felt it in her chest. "You're the best thing that happened to me in years. Maybe the best thing that's ever happened to me. Derek, I'm not saying this to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true. And I needed you to know, before I leave, before everything changes. I needed you to know that you mattered. That you still matter." Sheila was crying again. Silent tears rolling down her cheek, dripping onto the kitchen counter. "I have to go," she said, because if she didn't, she was going to say something she couldn't take back. "Okay. Goodbye, Derek. Goodbye, Sheila." She hung up. She put her phone face down on the counter. She finished her wine in one long swallow. And then she went upstairs, and she lay in bed next to her husband, and she stared at the ceiling until dawn. Derek's last week in Columbus was a blur of meetings and goodbyes and the kind of manic productivity that happens when people know their time is limited. Sheila saw him every day. They shook hands at presentations. They discussed transfer documents in meetings. They were always surrounded by colleagues, always at least 15 feet apart, always perfectly, painfully professional. But at night, the texts continued. On Tuesday, Derek asked if she wanted to get dinner. Just the two of them. One last time. She said yes before she could talk herself out of it. They met at a small Italian restaurant in the German village, a place with candlelight and wine and prided booths in the back. Derek was already there when Sheila arrived, seated at a corner table with a bottle of red wine breathing on the table. "You came," he said, as if he hadn't been sure. "I said I would." "I know. But I didn't know if you'd change your mind." She sat down across from him. The candlelight flickered between them, casting dancing shadows on the white tablecloth. "I'm here," she said. "That's what matters." They ordered. They ate. They talked about safe things, the office, the client, the new person coming in to replace Derek. They laughed about old stories and debated the merits of various corporate strategies and pretended, for the sake of appearances, that this was just a professional dinner between colleagues. But underneath all of it, the tension was a living thing. Every time their hands brushed reaching for the breadbasket, Sheila felt electricity arc through her. Every time Derek looked at her, really looked at her, with those gray eyes that saw everything, she had to stop herself from reaching across the table. When the plates were cleared and the wine was finished, Derek paid the bill. They walked out into the cold night air, their breath visible in small clouds. "My place is 10 minutes from here," he said quietly. "I have a bottle of whiskey I've been saving." Sheila knew she should say no. She knew that going to his place was a line she couldn't uncross. But she was so tired of being careful. So tired of being good. So tired of denying herself the one thing she had wanted for longer than she wanted to admit. "Okay," she said. Derek's townhouse was exactly as she had imagined it, clean, organized, decorated in shades of gray and navy blue with touches of brass and leather. There were books on the shelves and a piano in the corner that he admitted he never played, and a large window that looked out over a small backyard gone to sleep for winter. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He sat on the couch. He patted the cushion beside him. Sheila sat. They talked for a while, about nothing, about everything, about all the things they should have said months ago. Derek told her about his wife, about the slow drift that had happened over the years, the way they had become roommates instead of lovers. Sheila told him about Greg, about the time she had found those messages, about the marriage counseling they had tried and abandoned. "I'm not looking for an excuse," Sheila said. "I'm not telling you this to justify anything. I want you to understand where I'm coming from." "I understand," Derek said. "I do. And I want you to understand where I'm coming from too." He reached over and took her hand. His fingers were warm, slightly calloused, impossibly gentle. "I've wanted this for so long," he said. "I didn't expect you. I didn't plan for you. But now that I know you exist, I can't imagine going back to before." Sheila looked at their hands intertwined on the couch cushion between them. "What are we doing?" she whispered. "Something we can't take back," he said. "Something we shouldn't do. Does that stop you?" "No." He looked at her, and his eyes were dark, intense, burning. "Does it stop you?" Sheila answered by leaning forward and kissing him. It was nothing like she had imagined, and everything. His lips were warm and tasted faintly of whiskey, and when his hand came up to cup her face, she felt herself melt against him like ice in the sun. He pulled back after a moment, his breathing ragged. "Sheila, are you sure?" "No," she admitted. "But I don't care. I want this. I want you." He kissed her again, harder this time, and his hands slid into her hair, and she arched into him, and for a few perfect minutes, everything else fell away, her marriage, her guilt, her fear, all of it, until there was nothing left but the two of them and the impossible heat between them. He stood, pulling her up with him, and led her toward the bedroom. Sheila followed, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Inside the bedroom, he paused. "Are you absolutely sure?" Sheila nodded. She couldn't speak. He kissed her again, and his hands moved to the buttons on her blouse, and she helped him, and then his mouth was on her neck, her shoulder, her collarbone, and she was making sounds she didn't recognize as her own voice. He asked if she wanted him to turn off the light. She said yes, she couldn't bear to be seen, not like this, not in the full light of what she was doing. The light went dark. He kissed his way down her body, asking constantly if she was okay, if this was okay, and she kept saying yes, 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 until the words lost all meaning and there was only sensation, only want, only the overwhelming need to be filled. And then, at the moment of no return, something broke. Sheila didn't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the weight of what she was doing. Maybe it was a residual sense of loyalty to Greg, to her marriage, to the life she had built. Maybe it was simply the universe punishing her for wanting something she shouldn't have. She pushed him away. Hard. And in the darkness, she heard the sound that would haunt her for months. Derek gasping. Derek shifting. Derek saying her name in a voice full of confusion. And then, nothing. The absence of sound where there should have been more. "What happened?" she whispered into the dark. A long silence. "I'm sorry," Derek said. His voice was strange, tight, controlled, embarrassed. I can't." He trailed off. In the darkness, Sheila couldn't see his face, but she could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a stove. "Did I do something wrong?" No. No, of course not. He was quiet for another moment. Then, it's me. I'm sorry. I got in my head. I couldn't. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Sheila sat up in the darkness, pulling the sheet around herself. Her heart was still racing, but now for entirely different reasons. Confusion. Rejection. A strange, hollow feeling that she couldn't quite name. We should get dressed, Derek said finally. His voice was gentle but firm. I should take you home. Okay, Sheila said. They dressed in silence. He drove her home at 2 a.m., and they didn't speak the entire way. At her house, he leaned over and kissed her cheek, a gesture so chaste it almost made her laugh. I'm sorry, he said again. It's not your fault. I know. But I'm sorry anyway. She got out of the car. She walked up the driveway. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. She didn't look back. For the next 3 months, Sheila lived in a state of suspended grief. She went to work. She came home. She was a wife, a mother, a marketing director. She attended meetings and made presentations and smiled at colleagues in the hallway. But inside, something had broken. She couldn't stop replaying that night. The moments leading up to it, the heat and the want and the possibility. And then the silence. The darkness. The absence of what should have been. She didn't understand what had happened. Derek had seemed so certain, so eager. He had wanted her. She had felt it in every touch, every kiss, every ragged breath. But something had changed in that final moment, and she had no idea what. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself that it was probably for the best, that an affair would have complicated everything, that she should be relieved it hadn't gone further. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Greg was asleep, Sheila would lie awake and relive every detail of that evening. The way Derek had looked at her. The way his hands had felt on her body. The way he had asked, again and again, if she was sure. And she would wonder, was it something I did? Was I not enough? Was I too much? The questions spiraled, feeding on each other, growing larger and more monstrous with each passing night. She started sleeping poorly. She lost weight, 10 pounds in 2 months, enough that colleagues mentioned it and Greg asked if she was feeling all right. She said she was fine, just stressed about work, and he believed her because that's what Greg did. He believed the things she told him because believing was easier than questioning. Derek had left Columbus a week after that night. His replacement arrived in early January, a competent but uninspiring woman named Patricia Chun, who everyone agreed was a fine choice but no Derek Hartwell. Sheila saw Derek once, in February, when he came back to Columbus for a regional meeting. They were in the same room with 30 other people, and they didn't speak beyond professional pleasantries. But every time she looked up, he was already looking at her. After the meeting, he caught her in the hallway. Can we talk? We're talking, she said. Not here. Not about this. He lowered his voice. Can I call you? She should have said no. She should have walked away, back to her office, back to her life, back to the safety of what she knew. But she nodded. He called that night. She didn't answer. She listened to the voicemail he left instead, a long, rambling message about how sorry he was, how he hadn't meant to hurt her, how he still thought about her every day. She didn't call back. He texted her a week later. I miss you. She didn't respond. A month after that, she ran into him again at a client event in Cleveland. They were surrounded by people, So they did the professional greeting thing, handshake, small talk, exchange of business cards. But before he walked away, Derek leaned in close enough that only she could hear. "You've lost weight," he said. "Are you okay?" She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt all the old feelings rush back like a wave. "No," she said. "I'm not okay." "But it's not your problem." "It is my problem. I did this to you." "No." She shook her head. "You didn't do anything. I did this to myself. I wanted something I shouldn't have wanted, and I got exactly what I deserved. Sheila, I have to go." She walked away. She spent the rest of the evening avoiding him, and when the event ended, she drove home alone and cried for 3 hours straight. Sheila put in her resignation in April. The official reason was career advancement. She had been offered a position at a competing firm in Indianapolis, a VP of marketing role with better pay and a clearer path to the C-suite. Greg thought it made sense. Her mother called to congratulate her. No one asked why she was leaving Columbus, the city where she'd built her career for 8 years. No one wondered why she was moving to a place where she knew no one, with no network and no connections and no particular reason to start over. No one asked because no one saw how broken she had become. She told herself it was the right decision. She told herself that distance was the only way she would ever be able to move forward. She told herself that the guilt she felt every time she looked at Greg was just the price of having wanted something she shouldn't have. But late at night, when she was packing up her office and looking at the photo of her team on the wall, she knew the truth. She was running from Derek, from herself, from the part of her that would always wonder what would have happened if things had been different. Sheila's last day at the company was a Friday. She spent the morning in meeting, handing off account, tying up loose ends. In the afternoon, she cleaned out her office, 3 boxes of books and files and the accumulated detritus of 8 years. At 5 p.m., she was walking to the elevator when she heard someone call her name. She turned. Derek was standing in the hallway outside his office, a stack of folders in his arms. She had forgotten he was going to be in Columbia that day. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They stood there for a moment, neither quite sure what to say. Around them, people streamed past, heading home for the weekend, oblivious to the silent drama playing out between 2 people they thought they knew. "I heard you're leaving," Derek said. "Yeah. Tomorrow." "Where are you going?" "Indianapolis." "New job." That's good. Congratulations." She nodded. "Thank you." Another long pause. Derek shifted the folders in his arms, and Sheila watched his hand, the same hands that had touched her so gently in his bedroom, the same hands that had failed her in the worst possible way. "Sheila," he said quietly. Can I tell you something?" "Okay." He took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot these past few months about that night. About what happened. And I want you to know, it wasn't you. It was never you." Sheila felt something twist in her chest. "Then what was it?" Derek looked at her, and for a moment, his composure cracked. "It was me," he said. "It was all me. I got scared. I got in my head. I thought about my wife, my kids, my life in Chicago, and I panicked. And by the time I realized what I was doing, it was too late." "Too late for what?" "Too late to make it right. Too late to explain. I just froze. And I've regretted it every day since." Sheila stared at him. "You've had 3 months to tell me this." "I know. But I didn't know how. I didn't know if you even wanted to hear it. You stopped responding to my text, and I thought you hated me." "I don't hate you," Sheila said. "I don't hate you at all." "Then what do you feel?" She thought about the question. She thought about all the sleepless nights, all the weight she had lost, all the time she had relived that moment in the darkness trying to understand what had gone wrong. "I feel broken," she said finally. "I feel like you reached inside me and pulled out something I didn't know was there, and then you just left it hanging. And I don't know how to put it back." Derek closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know." Sheila took a step back. "But it did happen. And now I have to figure out how to live with it." She turned and walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. She waited. The doors opened. She stepped inside. Just before they closed, she heard Derek's voice. "Sheila, I loved you. I need you to know that. I really loved you." The doors closed. The elevator began its descent. And Sheila Marie Thornton, age 32, married mother and marketing executive, leaned against the wall and cried. That night, she sat in her nearly empty apartment, the old one, not yet sold, full of boxes and memories, and she wrote in the journal she had kept since college. "I have made a lot of mistakes in my life," she wrote. I married a man I wasn't sure about because he was stable and kind. I stayed with that man even when I found out he was messaging another woman. I had an affair with my boss, and then, when it fell apart, I blamed myself for something that wasn't my fault. I don't know what the right thing to do is anymore. I don't know if there even is a right thing. But I know that I can't keep living like this, torn between who I am and who I want to be, between what I have and what I think I deserve. Derek said he loved me. I believed him. But I also know that love isn't always enough. Sometimes love comes at the wrong time, in the wrong place, with the wrong person. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. I'm moving to Indianapolis tomorrow. I'm starting a new job, a new life. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself for what I did or for what I didn't do. But maybe that's okay. Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe the point is just to keep going. To wake up each day and choose something different. To learn from the past without being trapped by it. I don't know if that's growth or just another form of running. But it's all I have right now. She closed the journal. She turned off the lights. She lay down on the mattress in the empty room and stared at the ceiling until dawn. And when the sun rose over Indianapolis, she got up and she packed the last of her boxes, and she drove away from Columbus with everything she owned in the back of a rented SUV. She didn't look back. Not once. The end. Chapter 11, the month after. The weeks that followed Derek's departure were the longest of Sheila's life. Every morning she woke up and for a brief, disorienting moment, she forgot. She would reach for her phone expecting to see a message from him, some late-night confession, some small observation about his day, some reminder that she was thought about even in the mundane moments of his life. Then she would remember. And the weight would settle back onto her chest like a physical thing. She tried everything. She threw herself into work, taking on accounts she didn't need, staying at the office until 9 and 10 at night while Greg wondered aloud whether she was eating enough. She started running again, a habit she had abandoned years ago, and found herself pounding the pavement around their suburb in Columbus until her knees ached and her lungs burned and she couldn't think about anything except the pain in her body. She even tried talking to Greg. It was a Sunday afternoon in late February, and their son was at a friend's house for a playdate. Sheila had made lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, the kind of comfort food she hadn't made in years, and they were sitting at the kitchen table like a normal family, and suddenly the words were just there, clawing their way up her throat. "Greg, have you ever wondered if you married the right person?" He had looked up from his soup, a piece of cheese hanging from his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she had struggled to find the right words. "Don't you ever lie awake at night and think about the life you could have had? The choices you made and whether they were the right ones?" Greg had chewed slowly, swallowed, wiped his mouth with a napkin. Sometimes, he had said finally, "Sure. I think everyone does." "And what do you do when you think those thoughts?" He had considered the question with the same methodical seriousness he brought to everything: his fantasy football draft, his quarterly reviews at work, the proper way to fold a fitted sheet. "I think about what I have," he said. "I think about you, and about Jake, and about the life we've built. And then I remind myself that the life I have is pretty good. Better than most, honestly. But what if it's not enough?" The question came out more desperately than she had intended. Greg had looked at her with concern, real concern, the kind that made her feel guilty for even bringing it up. "Sheila, are you okay? Is this about work? Is something going on?" She had shaken her head. "No. Nothing's going on. I saw something on television last night. A documentary about regret and people who made different choices, and it got me thinking." Greg had reached across the table and taken her hand. "Well, whatever you're feeling, you know you can talk to me, right? I'm here. I've always been here." She had nodded. She had squeezed his hand. She had told herself that everything was fine, that she was just going through a phase, that these feelings would pass. And she had never mentioned Derek Hartwell again. In March, Sheila's new job offer came through. The firm in Indianapolis was called Meridian Consumer Group, and they were offering her a VP of marketing position with a salary that was 30% higher than what she was making now. The benefits were better. The office was newer. The career trajectory was clearer. The only downside was Indianapolis. A city she didn't know. A network she would have to build from scratch. A life she would have to construct entirely from nothing. She accepted the offer on a Tuesday morning, before she could talk herself out of it. By Tuesday afternoon, she had submitted her resignation at her current company, citing career advancement opportunities as the reason. Her colleagues were surprised. Some were supportive. Others whispered behind her back, speculating about why someone would leave such a well-established position after 8 years. Sheila didn't care. She was already planning her exit. Derek called her on her last day. She almost didn't answer. She was in her empty office, surrounded by boxes, and she had promised herself that she was done with him, that she was moving on, that she was choosing the life she had built over the life she had imagined. But when she saw his name on the screen, something in her broke. "Hello? Sheila." His voice was warm and familiar and devastating. "I heard you're leaving. News travels fast. Not fast enough. I had to hear it from Patricia, which is frankly embarrassing given that we used to talk every day." She laughed despite herself. "We didn't talk every day. Close enough." A pause. "Are you really going to Indianapolis?" "Really going?" That's a long way from here. Yes. Another pause. She could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, that small, intimate sound that had once made her feel connected to him in ways she couldn't articulate. I wanted to say goodbye, he said finally. And to tell you that I'm sorry. One more time. For everything. Sheila closed her eyes. Derek, I know you don't want to hear it. I know you've moved on. But I need you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Not for a single day since I left Columbus. Not for a single hour. Derek. I loved you, Sheila. I need you to believe that. Whatever else happened, whatever went wrong, that part was real. She was crying. She didn't know when she had started, but she could feel the tears on her cheeks, hot and insistent. I know, she whispered. I know you did. And you? Did you? Yes. The word came out before she could stop it. Yes, I loved you too. I still do, maybe. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was painful. Then why are you leaving? He asked. If there's still something there. Because it hurts too much to stay. Because every time I see your name on an email or hear someone mention the Chicago office, I fall apart. Because I can't keep living like this, Derek. I just can't. She heard him exhale, a long, slow breath that carried the weight of everything they had lost. Okay, he said. Okay. I understand. Do you? No, he admitted. But I respect it. They stayed on the phone for another few minutes, talking about nothing, the weather, the new job, the neutral topics that safe people discuss when they are trying not to discuss the things that matter. And then Sheila said she had to go, and Derek said he understood, and they said goodbye. She hung up the phone. She sat in her empty office. She cried until her eyes were swollen and her head was pounding. And then she picked herself up, and she finished packing her boxes, and she walked out of the building for the last time. Chapter 12, Indianapolis. The first 6 months in Indianapolis were the loneliest of Sheila's life. She rented a small apartment in a neighborhood called Broad Ripple, a quirky, arty area that reminded her, in small ways, of the short North District in Columbus. She decorated it with furniture she bought at IKEA and artwork she ordered online, and it looked like a magazine spread instead of a home because it had no history, no accumulated meaning, no traces of the life she had left behind. She went to work. She came home. She learned the names of her new colleagues and the unwritten rules of the corporate culture and the best restaurants within walking distance of her office. She built a new life, one careful brick at a time. But at night, when the apartment was dark and quiet and the silence pressed in on her like a physical weight, she found herself thinking about Derek. About that night in his townhouse. About the way his hands had felt on her body. About the moment everything had fallen apart. She couldn't stop reliving it. Couldn't stop asking herself what she had done wrong, what she could have done differently, what might have happened if she had been braver or more certain or less afraid. The therapist she started seeing in July, a kind woman named Dr. Elaine Morrison who had a practice near her apartment, called this rumination. Rumination is when we get stuck in a loop of negative thoughts, Dr. Morrison explained during their third session. We replay the same events over and over, looking for the moment where things went wrong, the thing we could have done differently. But the problem is, there's usually no single moment. Things just go wrong because they go wrong. People disappoint us because they're human. And the only way forward is to accept that and move on. But how? Sheila asked. How do I move move on from something like this? That's what we'll figure out together. They figured it out slowly, over months of weekly sessions. They talked about Sheila's childhood and her parents' unhappy marriage and the way she had learned, growing up, to suppress her own wants and needs in favor of stability and security. They talked about her relationship with Greg and the small resentments that had accumulated over the years, the things she had never said, the grievances she had never aired. And they talked about Derek. "You were looking for something in him," Dr. Morrison observed one day. "Something you felt like you couldn't get anywhere else." "What was I looking for?" "I think you were looking for someone who saw you. Really saw you, all the parts you show the world and all the parts you keep hidden. Most people only see the surface. But you found someone who looked deeper. And that felt like love, even though it might have been something else." "What else could it have been?" Dr. Morrison smiled gently. "Validation, maybe. Recognition. The feeling of being known. Those things can feel like love when we've been starved for them. But they're not quite the same." Sheila thought about this for a long time. "Maybe it was both," she said finally. "Maybe it was love and validation and recognition all at once, all tangled up together until I couldn't tell the difference." "That's possible," Dr. Morrison agreed. "Humans are complicated. Our feelings are complicated. We rarely experience anything in a pure, simple form." In October, Sheila flew back to Columbus for her nephew's wedding. She hadn't been back since she left in May, and she found herself dreading it, not because she didn't love her family, but because she didn't know what she would feel when she saw the city again. The places they had been together. The restaurant where they had their last dinner. The streets they had walked. But when the plane descended through the clouds and she saw the familiar sprawl of Columbus below, the shopping centers and the housing developments and the highway interchange where she had once sat in traffic for an hour thinking about whether to call Derek, she felt nothing but a kind of distant sadness. It was over. Whatever it had been, whatever it might have become, it was over. She got through the wedding weekend on autopilot. She danced with her nephews and complimented the bride's dress and made small talk with relatives who wanted to know about her new job and her new city and whether she was seeing anyone. "No one special," she told them, smiling. "I'm focusing on my career right now." They nodded approvingly. "Smart girl," her aunt said. "Men can wait. Your career can't." But her aunt was wrong. It wasn't about being smart. It was about being scared, scared of putting herself out there again, scared of wanting something she couldn't have, scared of discovering that the hole in her heart was too big to fill. On her last night in Columbia, Sheila drove past Derek's old townhouse. She didn't plan to do it. She was on her way to the airport, running late as usual, and somehow, without consciously choosing to, she took the exit for Dublin and found herself on the street where he had lived. The townhouse looked the same. The same brick facade, the same two-car garage, the same small patch of lawn that Derek had never seen to mow. But the car in the driveway was different, a silver minivan instead of the black sedan she remembered. Someone else lived there now. Someone who didn't know that a woman had once stood in that driveway at 2 in the morning, trembling with want and fear and a terrible weight of her own desires. Sheila pulled over to the side of the road. She sat in her rental car and stared at the townhouse and let herself feel everything she had been avoiding for months. She felt the grief for the relationship that never was, for the person she never got to become, for the life that might have been different if she had made different choices at different moments. She felt the shame for betraying Greg, for lying to her therapist, for wanting something she shouldn't have wanted. And she felt something else, too. Something she hadn't expected. She felt relief. It was over. Whatever it was Whatever it might have become, it was over. And she didn't have to carry it anymore. She didn't have to wonder what would have happened if things had been different. She didn't have to keep replaying that night in his bedroom, looking for the moment where everything went wrong. She could just let it go. She sat there for a long time, watching the lights come on in the windows of the townhouse. Whoever lived there now was home, was making dinner, was living a life without the weight of what had happened in that room. And eventually, Sheila started the car. She pulled back onto the road. She drove to the airport. She flew back to Indianapolis. She started over. Epilogue, 1 year later. Sheila Thornton is 34 years old and lives in a 2-bedroom condo in the suburbs of Indianapolis. She is still married to Greg, though they had been through more counseling in the past year than in the previous 5 years combined. They are learning to talk to each other, really talk, not just discuss logistics and schedules and the running of their household. It is slow work. It is painful work. But it is work that feels, for the first time in years, like it might actually be worth doing. She thinks about Derek sometimes. Less often now, but still sometimes, usually when she is falling asleep, and in that liminal space between waking and dreaming where the guard is down and the old memories surface unbidden. She doesn't hate him anymore. She doesn't love him either, not the way she once did. He has become, in her mind, a kind of cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when you look for fulfillment outside yourself, when you expect another person to fill a hole that only you can fill. She has not heard from him since that phone call on her last day. She doesn't know if he is still in Chicago, still married, still thinking about her in the small hours of the night. She hopes he has found peace, whatever that looks like for him. And she has found something too, not peace exactly, but something close to it. A sense of herself that is not dependent on anyone else's perception. An understanding that her worth is not determined by whether she is wanted by a certain kind of man. She is wanted by her son, who calls her every night before bed to say goodnight. She is wanted by Greg, who has learned, slowly and imperfectly, to see her in ways he never did before. She is wanted by her colleagues, who respect her work and value her insights. And she is wanted by herself, perhaps for the first time in her life. It is enough. It is more than enough. It is everything. Asterisk. The end. Chapter 13, The Year of Becoming. The first time Sheila went on a date after Indianapolis, she was 35 years old. His name was Brian, and he was a financial analyst at a consulting firm downtown. He was 42, divorced, with a 12-year-old daughter named Emma who played competitive soccer and an ex-wife who had custody of the dog. He had kind eyes and a gentle manner and a way of listening that made Sheila feel like she was the most interesting person in the room. They met at a wine bar in Broad Ripple, the same neighborhood where she lived, the same kind of place she had gone with colleagues from her new job. Brian had been recommended by a friend of a friend, one of those awkward setups that everyone secretly hates but participates in anyway. So, Brian said, swirling his glass of Cabernet, "Tell me about yourself." Sheila laughed. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." "Nothing. Whatever you feel like sharing." He smiled. "I'm not going to interrogate you. I just want to get to know you." It was such a simple request. Get to know you. But Sheila found herself freezing, the way she always did when someone asked her to be known. She told him the safe things. Her job at Meridian Consumer Group. Her son, Jake, who was thriving in middle school. Her husband, Greg, who was still in Columbus but who she saw every other weekend now that they had worked out a custody arrangement. She told him about Indianapolis, how she had moved here for a fresh start, how she was still finding her footing, how she sometimes missed the familiarity of home. She did not tell him about Derek. She did not tell him about the affair that never quite was, or the night that had broken something in her, or the months of therapy and self-examination that had followed. She kept those things locked away, hidden in the part of herself she had learned to protect. Brian nodded along, asking follow-up questions, offering small observations of his own. He was easy to talk to, not challenging, not pushy, not demanding more than she was ready to give. "I like you," he said, at the end of the night. "I know that's fast. We've only been talking for 2 hours. But I feel like I could talk to you for a long time." Sheila smiled. "I like you too." They went out again the following weekend. And the weekend after that. And the weekend after that. By Christmas, they were exclusive. It wasn't a dramatic conversation, nothing like the confession-laden text exchanges she had had with Derek, nothing like the fevered declarations of late-night phone calls. It was Brian who brought it up, casually, over dinner at an Italian restaurant near his apartment. "So," he said, "I think we should talk about where this is going." Sheila's heart clenched. "Okay. I like you, Sheila. I like you a lot. And I want to be with you, not just casually, not just seeing where things go. I want to be with you. And what does that look like? Exclusive. Committed. The whole saying." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I know your situation is complicated. I know you're still technically married, even though you and Greg are living separately. I don't want to push you into anything. But I also don't want to pretend this is something it's not." Sheila looked at their hands intertwined on the table, Brian's broad and warm, with a wedding ring tan line that she had noticed on their first date and had never mentioned. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay." She took a breath. "I'm not ready for this." Brian's face fell. "Oh. No, wait. Let me explain." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not ready to be exclusive. Not yet. I'm still figuring things out. I'm still carrying around things I haven't dealt with. And I don't want to start something new with you until I know I'm really free of all that." Brian nodded slowly. "Is there someone else?" She hesitated. She could have lied. She could have said no, deflected, avoided the question entirely. But she had promised herself, after everything that had happened, that she would be honest. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. "There's no one else," she said. "Not right now. But there was someone. Before. And I haven't fully processed it yet. I don't want to start something new with you while I'm still carrying that around." "The person from Columbus?" She looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" "You mention it sometimes. In your sleep or when you're distracted. You say a name sometimes, Derek. And you get this look on your face, like you're somewhere else." He smiled gently. "I'm not judging you. I have my own ghosts. I'm just asking you to be honest with me about where you are." Sheila felt tears prickling at her eyes. "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner. You don't have to tell me everything. Not yet. But I need to know that you're here, with me, because you want to be. Not because you're running from something. I want to be here." The words came out fierce, certain. "I promise you, Brian. I want to be here." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay. Then we can take it slow. We can figure this out together." They took it slow. For the next 6 months, they dated without exclusivity, seeing each other once or twice a week, talking on the phone most nights, gradually building something that felt real and solid and unlike anything Sheila had experienced before. She told him about Derek one night in March, lying in bed in his apartment, the city lights casting strange shadows on the ceiling. She told him everything, the texts, the night in his townhouse, the way everything had fallen apart. Brian listened without interrupting. When she was done, he was quiet for a long time. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. "I'm sorry if it's too much." "It's not too much." He turned to look at her. "I appreciate you trusting me with this. I know it wasn't easy. What are you thinking?" He considered the question. "I'm thinking that you went through something really hard, and that you're still healing, and that I want to be patient with you if you'll let me." Sheila felt something shift in her chest, a loosening, a relief. "You don't think I'm broken?" "I think everyone is broken in some way." Brian smiled. "I know I am. I just think broken things can still fit together, if they find the right shape." In July, Sheila filed for divorce. It was a simple, uncontested proceeding. Greg agreed to everything: the division of Athen, the custody arrangement, the relatively modest alimony he would pay for the next 2 years. There were no lawyers' offices full of acrimony, no custody battles fought over every weekend. Just 2 people who had tried to make something work and had failed, signing papers and moving on with their lives. The divorce was finalized in September. Sheila was 35 years old, single, living in Indianapolis, building a life that was entirely her own. She didn't tell Derek. She didn't know if Greg would tell him, if word would somehow filter back to Chicago through the corporate grapevine. But she didn't reach out, and he didn't reach out to her, and for the first time since she had left Columbus, she felt like she was truly free. In October, Brian asked her to marry him. They were hiking in Brown County State Park, about an hour south of Indianapolis. The leaves were at their peak, brilliant oranges and reds and yellows, the kind of display that made Indiana look almost beautiful in spite of itself. They had reached an overlook, a rocky outcropping that offered a view of the valley below. Brian had stopped walking, and when Sheila turned to see why, she found him on one knee. "I know this is fast," he said. "I know we've only been together a little over a year. But I also know what I want, Sheila. I want you. I want Emma to have you in her life. I want to build a family with you. Brian, you don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer yes. I just needed you to know how I feel." She looked at him, this kind, patient man who had waited for her, who had been honest with her, who had never pushed her for more than she was ready to give. "Yes," she said. He blinked. "Yes? Yes. I'll marry you." He stood up, took her in his arms, and kissed her. And standing there on that rocky outcropping, with the autumn colors blazing around them, Sheila felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt happy. Chapter 14, The Wedding. They got married the following June, in a small ceremony at a vineyard about 20 miles outside of Indianapolis. It was nothing like her first wedding, no church, no big white dress, no 300-person guest list full of people she barely knew. It was just close family and a few friends, gathered in a beautiful outdoor space, witnessing 2 people who had found each other at the right time. Sheila wore a simple ivory dress that came to her knees. Brian wore a light gray suit. Emma was the flower girl, scattering petals with the furious concentration of a 12-year-old who took her responsibilities very seriously. Greg was there. He had come with his girlfriend, a woman named Deborah who worked in HR at his company and who, Sheila had to admit, seemed like a much better match for him than Sheila had ever been. They were laughing together during the reception, leaning into each other in a way that suggested comfort and affection and the absence of resentment. Just before the ceremony, Greg had pulled Sheila aside. "You look happy," he said. "I am happy." "Good." He smiled. "I'm happy for you. I really am." She embraced him, this man she had married and divorced and spent so many years with, and for the first time she felt only gratitude. Not love, exactly, but something like peace. "Thank you," she said. "For everything. For trying. For letting go. Thank you for the same." The reception was held under a white tent, with long tables and twinkling lights and a band playing soft rock covers that everyone pretended to enjoy. Sheila circulated among the guests, accepting congratulations and compliments and well wishes from people whose names she was still learning. Near the edge of the tent, she found herself standing next to Marcus, my husband, who had flown in from Montana for the wedding. I had not been able to attend. One of my patients was due any day, and I couldn't risk being more than an hour away from the hospital. "She's a good one," Marcus said, watching Sheila's new stepdaughter dance with her friends. "Brian did well." "He did," Sheila agreed. "How are you?" "Really?" She thought about the question. "I'm good," she said. "Better than I'd been in a long time. Still working on some things, but good. That's all anyone can ask for." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the celebration around them. "Can I ask you something?" Sheila said. "Of course. Do you believe people can change? Really change, I mean. Not just superficially, but at the core." Marcus considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think people can change," he said finally. "But I think it requires something, a catalyst, maybe. Something that forces them to look at themselves honestly. Something that breaks them down before they can build themselves back up. Is that what happened to you?" He smiled. "Let's just say I had my own catalyst. My own breaking points." "And did you build yourself back up?" "I like to think so. With help." He looked at her. "You don't have to have all the answers, Sheila. You just have to be willing to keep asking the questions." She nodded. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being here. For being part of this." She paused. "For reminding me that there are good people in the world. People who see other people. People who care." Marcus raised his glass. "To the good people. And to the ones who are still learning to be good." She clinked her glass against his. And later that night, after the last guest had left and the tent was being taken down and the vineyard was returning to its quiet, ordinary self, Sheila stood with Brian on the small balcony of their honeymoon suite and looked at the stars. "Do you ever think about him?" Brian asked quietly. "Derek?" She didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Less now than before. But sometimes." "What do you think about?" She considered the question. "I think about what might have been. I think about the person I was when I was with him, how alive I felt, how seen. And I think about how much of that was real and how much was just the intensity of the situation. And what do you conclude?" "I conclude that it was both. It was real and it was intense, and it was also built on a foundation of lies and longing and the specific circumstances of two people who shouldn't have wanted each other but did anyway." She turned to look at Brian. "But this is real. Us, I mean. This feels more real than anything I've ever felt." "Why?" Because you've seen all of me. The good parts and the bad parts. The parts one want to be and the parts I'm ashamed of. And you're still here. Brian pulled her close. I'm not going anywhere, Sheila. I promise. She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steadiness of his arm, the certainty of his presence. I know, she said. That's the best part. Chapter 15, What Comes After. Sheila Thornton, now Sheila Chan, after the wedding, is 37 years old and lives in a 4-bedroom house in a suburb of Indianapolis with her husband Brian, her stepdaughter Emma, and a golden retriever named Murphy. She is still the VP of marketing at Meridian Consumer Group, though she has been approached by headhunters several times about opportunities in other cities. She keeps declining them. She has built a life here, a good life, a real life, and she is not interested in starting over again. Jake is 14 now, tall and awkward and increasingly embarrassed by his mother in all the ways teenagers are embarrassed by their parents. He lives with her during the school year and spends summers with Greg in Columbus. They talk on the phone every few days, and she flies up to see him at least once a month. It is not the life she had imagined when she got married at 24, but it is a life that works. She still thinks about Derek sometimes. Not as often as she once did, but still sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, or when she hears a song that reminds her of that year in Columbus. She has made peace with those memories, the way Dr. Morrison taught her to. She acknowledges them without being ruled by them. She lets them exist without letting them define her. She has never heard from Derek again. She doesn't know if he is still in Chicago, still married, still thinking about the woman he almost had and the moment he lost her. She hopes he has found peace, whatever form that takes for him. But she doesn't wonder about it much anymore. She has her own life to live, her own peace to find. And she has found it. Not the fairy tale, not the happily ever after that she used to dream about in the quiet hours of her marriage to Greg. But something better. Something more honest. Something that is built on the foundation of who she actually is, not who she was pretending to be. She is happy. Imperfectly, complicatedly, realistically happy. And that is enough. Asterisk. The end. Chapter 16, The Slow Burn of Healing. Sheila's relationship with her mother had always been complicated. Dorothy Thornton was a woman who had married a man she didn't love because he had a steady income and a house and a kind of reliability that could be mistaken for security. She had spent 40 years in a marriage that looked, from the outside, like contentment but felt, from the inside, like slow suffocation. She had raised 3 children to believe that love was a luxury and stability was a necessity. And then she had watched 2 of them build lives that looked remarkably like her own. Sheila's older sister, Catherine, was a neurologist at Johns Hopkins, brilliant, ambitious, completely unmarried at 45. Her older brother, Michael, was a patent attorney in Boston, also unmarried, also brilliant, also lost in his own way. They had all escaped their parents' house and built something different, but they had all, in their own ways, ended up alone. I worry about you, Dorothy said during one of their weekly phone calls, 3 months after the divorce was finalized. You're 35 years old, you're divorced, you're living in a city where you don't know anyone. What are you thinking? I'm thinking and I'm happy, Mom. Happy. Dorothy's voice was flat with skepticism. Happy is temporary. Stable is forever. Sheila closed her eyes. She had heard this speech 100 times, in one form or another. Her mother's worldview was a closed loop, a self-reinforcing narrative about the dangers of wanting too much, of chasing happiness instead of security, of making choices based on feeling instead of practicality. I know you believe that, Sheila said carefully. But I don't think it's true. Not for everyone. Not for me. What do you know about love, Sheila? You're 35 years old. You were married for 11 years. You had one affair that nearly destroyed everything. And now you're dating some man you met through friends, and you think that qualifies you to lecture me about what love is? The words stung because they were partly true. What did Sheila know about love? She had spent most of her adult life in a marriage that was more comfortable than passionate, more practical than romantic. She had then spent 6 months in the orbit of a man who had made her feel seen and wanted and alive, only to watch it all collapse in a single night. And now she was with Brian, kind, patient Brian, trying to build something real from the wreckage of everything that had come before. "You're right," Sheila said. "I don't know everything about love. But I know that I spent 15 years being miserable in a marriage that looked fit on paper. And I know that I'd rather be alone and honest than coupled and pretending." Silence on the other end of the line. "I'm worried about you," Dorothy said again, but her voice had softened slightly. "I know, Mom. I love you too." The thing about healing, Sheila discovered, was that it wasn't linear. There were good days when she felt almost normal, when she could think about Derek without feeling a pang in her chest, when she could focus on her work or her relationship or her son without being pulled back into the past. There were bad days when the memories crashed over her like waves, when she found herself lying on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. unable to breathe, when she wondered if she would ever be truly free of the weight she was carrying. But there were also days in between, ordinary days, unremarkable days, days when she woke up and went to work and came home and ate dinner and watched television and went to bed without once thinking about the night in Columbus that had changed everything. Those were the days that gave her hope. Those were the days that suggested healing was possible, even if she couldn't see it happening. Brian helped. Not by fixing her or solving her problems, but by being present, by showing up, day after day, with his patient understanding and his gentle humor and his willingness to let her be broken without trying to tape her back together. "I don't need you to be fixed," he told her one night, when she was spiraling after a particularly vivid dream about Derek. "I just need you to be here. However broken you are, wherever you are in the process, I just need you to be here. What if I'm still broken in a year? What if I'm still broken in 5 years? Then I'll still be here." He shrugged. "I'm a patient man, Sheila. I've waited this long to find someone worth waiting for. I can wait a little longer." Sheila started writing in a journal, not the kind of journal she had kept as a teenager, full of dreamy observations about boys and school and the distant future. This was something different. This was a record of her healing, her questions, her fears, her hopes. "Why do I still think about him?" she wrote one night in April, a year after the incident. Asterisk, it's been over a year. I've done the therapy, I've processed the feeling, I've rebuilt my life from the ground up. Why does he still show up in my dreams? Why do I still feel that twinge when I hear his name? Asterisk. She stared at the page for a long time. Then she wrote, Asterisk, maybe it's not about him anymore. Maybe it's about me, about the part of me that wanted to be seen so badly that I was willing to risk everything to feel it. Maybe I don't miss Derek specifically. Maybe I miss the version of myself that existed when I was with him, the woman who felt alive, who felt wanted, who felt like she mattered. Asterisk. Asterisk, and maybe the question isn't how to stop thinking about him. Maybe the question is how to become that woman again, not through someone else's eyes, but through my own. Asterisk. She read the entry back to herself. It sounded like something Dr. Morrison would say, therapeutic, insightful, slightly clinical. But it also felt true in a way that nothing else had. She was not trying to get over Derek. She was trying to become someone who didn't need his validation to feel worthy. In August, Sheila flew to Columbus for Jake's birthday. It was the first time she had been back since her official move to Indianapolis, and she found herself dreading it in ways she hadn't expected. The city that had been her home for 8 years was now populated with ghosts. The restaurant where she and Derek had shared their last dinner, the office building where she had spent countless hours pretending to focus on work while thinking about him, the neighborhood where his townhouse stood with someone else's minivan in the driveway. Greg met her at the airport. He looked different, happier, somehow more at ease with himself. He had been seeing Deborah for over a year now, and it showed. He had lost the slightly harried expression that had characterized their later years of marriage, the sense that he was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You look good," Sheila said. "So do you." He smiled. "Indianapolis is treating you well, apparently." "Indianapolis is fine. The job is good. Brian is." She paused, searching for the right word. "Brian is wonderful." "I'm glad." Greg meant it. She could tell from his tone, genuine, uncomplicated, free of the resentment that had poisoned their final years together. "He's lucky. We're both lucky." They drove to the house they had once shared, now Greg's house, with Deborah's touches and a garden and the new welcome mat that said the Thorntons in cheerful letters. It was strange to walk through rooms that had been hers, to see photographs on the walls that no longer included her face. But it was also liberating. The house was a relic of a life she had outgrown. She didn't need to live in it to honor what it had been. Jake's party was at a trampoline park, loud and chaotic and full of 12-year-olds who had too much sugar and not enough supervision. Sheila watched him laugh and jump with his friends, and she felt a surge of love so powerful it made her eyes sting. She had built this life, this complicated, imperfect, beautiful life, through choices and mistakes and the slow, painful work of learning who she was. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. On her last night in Columbus, Sheila drove past Derek's old townhouse one more time. She didn't know why. She wasn't looking for anything. She just needed to see it, one last time, to close the chapter she had been trying to close for over a year. The townhouse looked the same as it always had. Same brick facade, same small lawn, same silver minivan in the driveway. Whoever lived there now had hung a wind chime on the front porch, and it was making a soft, musical sound in the evening breeze. Sheila pulled over to the side of the road. She sat in her rental car and looked at the townhouse and let herself feel everything she had been avoiding. She felt the grief, for the relationship that never was, for the person she never got to become, for the life that might have been different if she had made different choices at different moments. She felt the shame for betraying Greg, for lying to herself, for wanting something she shouldn't have wanted. She felt the anger at Derek for not being braver, at herself for not being stronger, at the universe for giving her a taste of something and then taking it away. And she felt something else, too. Something that had been growing in her for months, slowly and quietly, like a plant pushing through soil. She felt gratitude. Gratitude for having been seen, even if only for a moment. Gratitude for having felt something real, even if it was in the wrong context with the wrong person. Gratitude for having survived the worst thing that had ever happened to her and come out the other side still standing. She didn't know if what she had felt for Derek was love. She didn't know if what she felt for Brian was love. She didn't know if love was the kind of thing that could be defined or measured or understood. But she knew that she was loved. By Brian, by Jake, by the friends she had made in Indianapolis, and the family who, despite their complicated dynamics, showed up for her in their own imperfect ways. And she knew, with a certainty that felt like sunrise after a long, dark night, that she loved herself. not in the narcissistic way she had once dismissed as self-indulgent, but in a practical, grounded way that Dr. Morrison had taught her. The kind of self-love that meant treating herself with kindness, setting boundaries, asking for what she needed, and refusing to settle for less than she deserved. She was enough. She had always been enough. And now, finally, she believed it. She started the car. She pulled back onto the road. She drove to the airport. She flew back to Indianapolis, to Brian, to Emma, to Murphy the golden retriever, to the life she was still building one day at a time. And she never looked back. Final chapter, what remains. Sheila Thornton is 40 years old as I write this. She is sitting in the kitchen of her home in Indianapolis, watching the morning light stream through the windows, listening to the sounds of her family moving through the rooms around her. Brian is making breakfast. He does that on Sunday morning, a ritual they have developed over the years. Emma is upstairs getting ready for a soccer game. Murphy is asleep in a patch of sunlight near the door. Jake is in Colorado at a summer program for teenagers interested in science and technology. He calls every few days to update her on his project, his friends, his plans for the future. He is 16 now, tall and serious and increasingly his own person. Sheila watches him become himself with a mixture of pride and sorrow, the pride of a mother watching her child grow, the sorrow of knowing that the days of his childhood are numbered. She doesn't think about Derek anymore. Not really. He has become, in her mind, a chapter in a book she has finished reading, important for what it taught her, but no longer relevant to the story she is living now. She has no idea where he is or what he is doing, and she prefers it that way. Some people belong in the past. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, she thinks about that night in his townhouse, not with pain or shame, but with something closer to curiosity. She wonders what would have happened if things had been different, if he hadn't gone soft, if they had actually consummated the affair, if they had tried to build something together. She doesn't wonder for long. She knows, in her bones, that it wouldn't have worked. They were both too broken, too scared, too caught up in the fantasy of each other to see what was really there. They wanted the idea of each other, not the reality. And idea, however beautiful, cannot sustain a life. She is grateful for what happened, in a strange and complicated way. Grateful for the pain that forced her to examine herself. Grateful for the loss that led her to Brian. Grateful for the journey that brought her here, to this kitchen, this morning, this life. She doesn't know what comes next. She doesn't know what challenges or joys or sorrows await her in the years ahead. But she knows one thing with absolute certainty. She will face them as herself. Unbroken, if not unbowed. Loved and loving. Ready. And that is enough. More than enough. It is everything.